A backpacking tourist, Ryan eagerly hikes up the trails near the Hollywood sign, camera in hand. As twilight settles, he pauses to catch his breath and admire the city lights. Suddenly, a brilliant flash illuminates the sky, followed by a metallic hum. Hovering above the iconic sign is a sleek, otherworldly craft. His heart pounds as a beam of light engulfs him. Just as he's about to scream, the light vanishes, and so does the UFO. What happens next will forever change Ryan's understanding of reality. Ryan stumbled down the dark, winding trail leading away from the Hollywood sign, his breaths coming in sharp, panicked gasps. The experience he had just endured felt impossible to comprehend. His camera, dangling uselessly from his neck, was eerily silent, as if even it had been too stunned to function. Moments earlier, the brilliant flash in the sky and the low, unearthly hum had left him frozen in place. Now, his every instinct screamed for him to run. The distant buzz of traffic from Los Angeles below seemed like a lifeline, something familiar in the face of the incomprehensible. As he reached a clearing, Ryan forced himself to stop and lean against a gnarled oak tree, clutching his knees as he tried to catch his breath. His skin tingled in a way he couldn't explain, as if static electricity danced along his arms and legs. Despite the balmy night air, a cold sweat coated his forehead. Shakily, Ryan fished his phone out of his pocket and tried to call for help, but the screen refused to light up. His heart sank as he realized the battery had drained entirely, an oddity considering it had been fully charged before he began his hike. He glanced at his camera next, flipping through the photos he had taken earlier. They were crisp, vibrant shots of the Hollywood sign and the breathtaking Los Angeles skyline at sunset. But when he scrolled to the photos he had snapped during the UFO sighting. "What the hell?" Ryan muttered to himself, his voice trembling. He instinctively rubbed his arms, trying to shake the eerie sensation that something was still watching him. The night had grown unsettlingly silent. Even the chirping of crickets seemed to have ceased. He glanced around nervously, half expecting the UFO to return. Shoving his camera back into his bag, Ryan resumed his hurried descent down the trail. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves made him jump, his imagination conjuring shadowy figures lurking in the darkness. It wasn't until he reached the main road that he finally allowed himself to exhale, relief washing over him like a wave. Cars whizzed by, their headlights momentarily blinding him. The normalcy of it all felt surreal after what he had just experienced. Back at his hostel, Ryan collapsed onto the creaky twin bed in his room, the events of the evening replaying in his mind on an endless loop. He absent-mindedly scratched his forearm, frowning when he felt a strange texture beneath his fingertips. Lifting his arm to inspect it under the dim light, his eyes widened in horror. Strange, intricate symbols were etched into his skin, glowing faintly with a soft, bluish hue. They weren't painful, but they weren't exactly comforting either. "Okay, nope, this isn't happening," Ryan said aloud, shaking his head. He grabbed a towel and scrubbed at the marks, but they refused to budge. Panic set in as he realized the symbols weren't drawn or tattooed. They were embedded into his very skin. Desperate for answers, Ryan turned to his laptop. He typed UFO symbols glowing skin into the search bar, feeling ridiculous even as he hit enter. The results were a mess of conspiracy websites, forums, and blurry photos of alleged alien encounters. Frustrated, he clicked on the first link, which led him to a poorly designed page titled Alien Abductions and You. The text was riddled with typos, but one section caught his attention. Marks left behind. Sometimes, contact with extraterrestrial beings leaves physical evidence on the body, the page read. These marks can appear as burns, scars, or even strange symbols that act as a kind of alien communication. Ryan leaned back in his chair, his pulse pounding in his ears. Alien communication? The idea seemed absurd, but what other explanation was there? He glanced at his arm again, tracing the glowing symbols with his finger. They seemed to shimmer in response, as if alive. The sudden sound of his phone buzzing startled him. He grabbed it, surprised to see it had turned back on despite its earlier refusal to work. The screen displayed an unknown number, but something compelled him to answer. "Hello," he said, his voice shaky. A distorted, mechanical voice crackled through the speaker. "You have been chosen. Do not resist." Ryan's heart nearly stopped. "What? Who is this?" But the line went dead. His hand shook as he lowered the phone, a sinking feeling settling in his gut. He couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had happened on the trail wasn't over, not by a long shot. As the hours dragged on, exhaustion finally overtook him. He drifted into a restless sleep, but his dreams were anything but ordinary. Images of strange, glowing landscapes and towering humanoid figures with elongated limbs filled his mind. They spoke in a language he didn't understand, yet somehow he knew they were trying to tell him something important. When Ryan woke the next morning, the symbols on his arm had spread further, branching out like veins of light. He stared at them in a mix of awe and terror, realizing with chilling certainty that his life was no longer his own. Whatever had marked him wasn't done with him yet. Ryan's arm burned with a faint, tingling heat as he hurried down the busy streets of Los Angeles, his hoodie pulled tightly around him to hide the glowing symbols now spreading up to his shoulder. He'd spent the better part of the morning trying to rationalize what was happening, but nothing made sense. Whatever he had encountered last night, it was no hoax or hallucination. And now, he felt like a walking target. The distorted phone call from the night before still echoed in his mind. "You have been chosen." Chosen for what? His head spun with unanswered questions, each one more terrifying than the last. He had no one to turn to, no family or close friends who could possibly understand. His first instinct was to return to the trail and retrace his steps, but fear of another encounter stopped him. Instead, he wandered aimlessly through the city, his thoughts racing. By late afternoon, Ryan found himself standing outside a dimly lit bookstore with a sign reading "Cosmic Mysteries and Conspiracies." The faded storefront looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years, but something about it drew him in. He pushed open the creaking door, a bell jingling above him, and was greeted by the overpowering scent of incense and the sight of cluttered shelves filled with books about UFOs, government cover-ups, and ancient aliens. "Help you with something?" a gruff voice called out. Ryan turned to see a man sitting behind the counter sipping from a mug. He was middle-aged with unkempt hair and glasses perched crookedly on his nose. His name tag read, "Eddie." Yeah," Ryan stammered. "I need, I don't know, answers, I guess." Eddie raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "That's a bit vague, kid. What kind of answers?" Ryan hesitated, then pulled back his sleeve just enough to reveal the glowing symbols on his arm. Eddie's eyes widened and he set his mug down with a thud. "Where the hell did you get that?" Eddie asked, his tone suddenly serious. It just appeared, after I saw something near the Hollywood sign last night. A UFO. Eddie's expression shifted from skepticism to alarm. He leaned in closer, studying the symbols intently. "Do you have any idea what you're dealing with?" "No," Ryan admitted. "That's why I'm here." Eddie grabbed a notebook from under the counter and began flipping through pages filled with sketches and notes. "These symbols, they're not random. I've seen something similar before, in reports from abductees. They're like a language, a kind of map or guide. But this," he pointed to Ryan's arm, "this is way more advanced. It's like they imprinted something on you." "Imprinted?" Ryan repeated, his stomach twisting. "Yeah. Think of it like a stamp or a beacon. They've marked you for a reason, and if they marked you, they're not done with you yet." The words sent a chill down Ryan's spine. "So, what do I do? How do I get rid of it?" Eddie shook his head. "You don't. Not unless they decide to take it back. But there's something you need to know. This isn't just about you. If they've given you a map, it's because they want you to find something, or lead them to it." "Find what?" Ryan asked, his voice rising. Eddie glanced around the store nervously, then lowered his voice. "There are rumors about an artifact hidden somewhere in the Hollywood Hills, something ancient and not of this world. People have been chasing it for decades, but no one's ever found it. If these markings are a map, it might lead straight to it." Ryan's mind raced. An artifact? He wanted to dismiss the idea as ridiculous, but after everything he'd experienced, it didn't seem so far-fetched. "And what happens if I find it?" Eddie hesitated. "That depends on what they want with it. Some say it's a key. Others think it's a weapon. Either way, it's powerful enough that you're not the only one looking for it." "What do you mean?" Eddie leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "There are people, agencies that know about this stuff. Government, private organizations, you name it. They'll do anything to get their hands on alien tech, and if they find out you've got a map—" Ryan didn't need him to finish the sentence. He pulled his sleeve back down, suddenly feeling exposed. "So, what do I do?" Eddie leaned back, crossing his arms. "If it were me, I'd stay far away from all of this. But you're already in too deep, kid. If they've marked you, running won't help. You've got to see this through. Whatever's at the end of that map, it's not just about you. It's bigger than that." Ryan felt the weight of Eddie's words settle over him like a heavy blanket. He didn't want any part of this, but it seemed he didn't have a choice. The symbols on his arm began to glow brighter, as if reacting to his decision. "Fine," he said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "Where do we start?" Eddie grabbed a flashlight and a worn map of the Hollywood Hills from behind the counter. "First, we figure out where this map is leading you. Then we pray we're the first ones to get there." As Ryan followed Eddie out of the bookstore, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city. He had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was clear: his life would never be the same again. The Hollywood Hills loomed ahead as Ryan and Eddie trudged up a secluded dirt trail, their flashlights slicing through the thick veil of night. Ryan's arm glowed faintly under his sleeve, the symbols pulsating in a steady rhythm as if guiding him forward. Every step they took felt heavier than the last, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him like a physical force. "So," Ryan said, his voice breaking the tense silence, "how exactly do you know all this stuff? The alien markings, the artifact, everything?" Eddie glanced at him, his flashlight casting long shadows across his face. "Let's just say I've been looking into this for a long time. I've seen enough to know when something's not from this planet." Ryan wasn't entirely convinced. "You're a conspiracy theorist, right?" "Researcher," Eddie corrected, his tone clipped. "And before you ask, yes, I've seen some things, but nothing like this." He gestured toward Ryan's arm. "Whatever's happening to you, it's big. Bigger than anything I've ever seen." Ryan sighed, pulling his hoodie tighter around him as the night air grew colder. "Great. That makes me feel so much better." The symbols on his arm flared briefly, their light growing stronger. Eddie stopped in his tracks, holding up a hand. "Wait." "What is it?" Ryan asked, his pulse quickening. Eddie pointed toward the ground. "Look." Ryan's eyes followed the beam of Eddie's flashlight, landing on a set of fresh footprints in the dirt. They were large, far too large to belong to a human, and they appeared to have claw-like indentations at the tips. Ryan's stomach churned. "Those don't look normal," he muttered. Eddie knelt to inspect the tracks. "They're not. Whatever made these is still out here." "Still out here?" Ryan repeated, his voice rising. "You mean we're not alone?" Eddie stood, his expression grim. "We never were." The words hung in the air, sending a chill down Ryan's spine. They pressed on, their footsteps crunching against the dirt in an uneasy rhythm. The trail grew steeper, winding upward through dense foliage. The further they went, the more Ryan felt the symbols on his arm pulling him, like an invisible force tugging at his very core. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a small clearing. The symbols on Ryan's arm pulsed brightly, illuminating the area like a beacon. In the center of the clearing stood a jagged rock formation, its surface etched with markings that mirrored the ones on Ryan's skin. "This is it," Eddie whispered, his voice filled with awe. Ryan stepped closer, his heart pounding in his chest. The symbols on his arm seemed to resonate with the markings on the rock, their glow intensifying. He reached out hesitantly, his fingers hovering over the surface. "Wait," Eddie hissed. "We don't know what will happen if you touch it." "I don't think I have a choice," Ryan said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. It's calling me." Before Eddie could protest, Ryan pressed his hand against the rock. The instant his skin made contact, the ground trembled violently, and a low hum filled the air. A bright, blinding light erupted from the rock, forcing Eddie to shield his eyes. Ryan, however, stood frozen, his hand glued to the surface as the symbols on his arm flared to life. Images flooded his mind, visions of alien landscapes, towering spires of light, and beings with elongated forms. He saw planets bathed in unfamiliar suns and spacecraft that defied the laws of physics. And then a voice, deep, resonant, and unmistakably alien. "You are the key," the voice said, echoing in his mind. "The artifact must be awakened." Ryan's knees buckled and he collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. Eddie rushed to his side, shaking him. "Ryan, are you okay? What happened?" Ryan struggled to catch his breath, his eyes wide with terror. It spoke to me." "What did it say?" Eddie asked, his voice urgent. Ryan swallowed hard. "It said, I'm the key, and that the artifact needs to be awakened." Eddie's face paled. "Awakened? That doesn't sound good." Before Ryan could respond, a rustling sound came from the trees surrounding the clearing. Both men turned, their flashlights sweeping across the darkness. The clawed footprints they had seen earlier suddenly felt all too real. "We need to go," Eddie said, his voice low and tense. Ryan nodded, but before they could move, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall, easily over 7 feet, and its skin shimmered with a metallic sheen. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and it moved with an unnatural grace. Eddie froze, his flashlight trembling in his hand. "What the hell is that?" The creature raised a hand, and the air around them seemed to ripple. Ryan's arm burned fiercely, the symbols flaring brighter than ever. The creature tilted its head, as if studying him. "You carry the map," it said, its voice reverberating in their minds. "You must complete the path." Ryan's knees threatened to give out again, but he forced himself to stand. "What path? What are you talking about?" The creature stepped closer, its gaze fixed on Ryan. "The artifact must be brought to the gate. It is the only way to restore balance." Eddie finally found his voice. "What gate? Balance? What are you talking about?" The creature ignored him, its attention solely on Ryan. "You must not fail. Others will come for the artifact. They must not succeed." Before Ryan could ask another question, the creature vanished, dissolving into a cascade of light. The clearing fell silent once more, the only sound the ragged breathing of the two men. Eddie turned to Ryan, his face pale. "What the hell have we gotten ourselves into?" Ryan didn't have an answer. All he knew was that the stakes had just been raised, and there was no turning back now. Ryan and Eddie sprinted down the trail, their breath ragged and uneven as the weight of the creature's words sank in. The symbols on Ryan's arm pulsed erratically, their glow piercing through his sleeve like a flickering neon sign. Whatever balance the creature had spoken of, Ryan was certain it wasn't just a metaphor. It felt cosmic, far beyond anything he could comprehend. "This is insane," Eddie muttered, clutching the flashlight that now felt more like a fragile toy. "We've got an alien artifact, glowing symbols, and now metallic giants telling us we're on some kind of mission. What the hell did we stumble into?" Ryan didn't answer. His mind raced with thoughts of the others the creature had warned about. If there were others hunting the artifact, they could already be closing in. And, judging by the way Eddie kept glancing over his shoulder, he shared the same fear. As they reached a fork in the trail, Eddie stopped abruptly, holding a hand out to signal Ryan. "Wait. Listen." Ryan froze, straining to hear beyond the pounding of his heart. The forest was alive with the usual symphony of chirping crickets and rustling leaves, but beneath it all was something else. A faint hum, low and mechanical, growing louder by the second. "Drones," Eddie whispered, his face pale. "They've found us." Ryan's stomach dropped. The sound grew sharper, now accompanied by flashes of light cutting through the trees. Eddie grabbed his arm and pulled him off the trail, diving into a thicket of bushes. They crouched low as two black spherical drones zipped past, their lenses scanning the ground with beams of red light. "Military. Government," Ryan whispered. Eddie shook his head. "Private, maybe. Whoever they are, they're not amateurs." The drones hovered for a moment before moving farther down the trail. Eddie let out a shaky breath. "We've got to keep moving. If they've sent drones, there'll be boots on the ground soon." They crawled out of the bushes and veered off the main trail, navigating through the dense underbrush. Every step felt like a gamble, the weight of their pursuers pressing down on them. Ryan's arm burned again, the glow intensifying as if urging him to keep going. "Where's it leading us now?" Eddie asked, noticing the renewed light. "I don't know," Ryan replied, "but it feels closer." They pushed forward, their pace quickening despite the uneven terrain. The hum of the drones faded, but the sense of being hunted didn't. Ryan's mind flashed back to the creature's warning. "Others will come for the artifact. They must not succeed." Suddenly, the symbols on his arm flared so brightly that Eddie had to shield his eyes. Ryan stumbled to a halt, clutching his arm as the burning sensation grew unbearable. "What's happening?" Eddie asked, panic creeping into his voice. Before Ryan could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. A loud crack echoed through the forest as a massive section of the hillside shifted, revealing a hidden passageway. The entrance was lined with metallic panels, faintly glowing with the same symbols that adorned Ryan's arm. "That was not there before," Eddie said, his jaw slack. Ryan staggered toward the entrance, drawn by an invisible force. "I think this is where it wants me to go." Eddie hesitated, glancing back at the trail. "What if it's a trap?" Ryan turned to him, his expression resolute. "I don't think we have a choice." Eddie sighed, muttering something under his breath about terrible life decisions, and followed Ryan into the passageway. The air inside was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the earthy forest outside. The walls hummed faintly, pulsing with light as if alive. As they ventured deeper, the passage widened into a cavernous chamber. At its center stood a pedestal, and atop it rested the artifact, a metallic sphere etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change when looked at directly. It emitted a faint, otherworldly glow, illuminating the chamber with an ethereal light. "This has to be it," Eddie said, his voice barely above a whisper. Ryan approached the pedestal cautiously. The symbols on his arm flared brighter with every step, syncing perfectly with the patterns on the sphere. He reached out, his fingers trembling, and hovered his hand above the artifact. "Are you sure about this?" Eddie asked, his tone laced with fear. "No," Ryan admitted, "but I don't think I have a choice." The moment his fingers made contact with the sphere, a surge of energy coursed through his body. The chamber filled with light, and Ryan's mind was once again flooded with visions. This time, they were more vivid. Scenes of alien battles, collapsing worlds, and a gateway that pulsed with unimaginable power. "The gate must be opened," the voice from before echoed in his mind. "But beware the ones who seek to use it for destruction." Ryan's hand released the artifact as he stumbled back, gasping for air. Eddie caught him before he could fall. "What did it say this time?" Eddie asked. Ryan looked up at him, his face pale. "It's a gate, and if we don't open it, something terrible will happen. But if the wrong people get to it first—" Their conversation was cut short by the sound of footsteps echoing down the passageway. Eddie's flashlight flickered as shadows danced across the walls. "They're here," Eddie whispered, pulling Ryan to his feet. The two scrambled to find cover as voices echoed through the chamber. Men in tactical gear, armed with advanced weaponry, entered the room, their faces obscured by helmets. One of them stepped forward, his gaze locking onto the artifact. "Secure the sphere," he commanded. Ryan's pulse raced. The symbols on his arm burned brighter than ever, as if urging him to act. He exchanged a glance with Eddie, who nodded grimly. "Whatever happens," Eddie whispered, "don't let them take it." The chamber erupted into chaos as Ryan and Eddie made their move. Scrambled for cover behind a jagged piece of the wall. The tactical team spread out, their weapons aimed directly at the artifact. The leader barked commands into a headset, his voice sharp and methodical. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest as he clutched the artifact closer, the symbols on his arm glowing brighter with each passing second. "We can't fight them," Ryan hissed, his voice barely audible over the sound of boots on metal. "We don't need to fight them," Eddie whispered back, gripping a metal pipe he had found on the ground. "We just need to distract them long enough to get out of here." Ryan wasn't sure how Eddie planned to pull that off. The tactical team was armed to the teeth with advanced weaponry, and they looked like they meant business. One wrong move, and this could be the end of the line. "Target the artifact," the leader ordered. "Do not let them escape with it." Ryan's blood turned cold. He could feel the artifact vibrating in his hands as if it were alive. The symbols on his arm burned like fire, urging him to act. He exchanged a look with Eddie, who gave him a grim nod. "Go," Eddie mouthed. Before Ryan could argue, Eddie leaped out from their hiding spot, swinging the pipe wildly. "Hey, over here," he shouted, drawing the team's attention. The soldiers turned their weapons on him, momentarily distracted. Ryan didn't waste a second. Clutching the artifact tightly, he darted toward the far end of the chamber where a narrow passageway led deeper into the structure. The artifact's glow illuminated the path ahead, guiding him like a beacon. Behind him, he heard the sharp crack of gunfire and Eddie's voice shouting obscenities. "Eddie!" Ryan yelled, skidding to a halt. "Keep going," Eddie's voice echoed back. "I'll hold them off." Torn between staying to help and obeying Eddie's command, Ryan hesitated for a split second. But the artifact's pull was undeniable, and deep down, he knew Eddie was right. If the artifact fell into the wrong hands, it would all be for nothing. With a heavy heart, Ryan turned and ran, the sounds of the struggle fading behind him. The passageway twisted and turned, the walls narrowing as he went deeper. The air grew colder, and the symbols on the walls seemed to come alive, shifting and pulsing in rhythm with the ones on his arm. Finally, the passage opened into another chamber, smaller but no less awe-inspiring. At its center stood a pedestal, surrounded by a ring of what looked like ancient machinery. The artifact in Ryan's hands pulsed with light, syncing perfectly with the machinery's glow. "This must be the gate," Ryan muttered to himself, stepping closer. The moment he placed the artifact on the pedestal, the room came alive. The machinery roared to life, gears and panels shifting in ways that defied logic. A beam of light shot upward from the pedestal, forming a swirling vortex of energy in the air above. Ryan shielded his eyes as the room vibrated with an almost unbearable intensity. "You've done well," a familiar voice echoed in his mind. Ryan spun around to see the metallic creature from earlier standing at the entrance to the chamber, its glowing eyes fixed on the gate as it stepped forward, its movements fluid and deliberate. "What is this?" Ryan demanded. "What's happening?" "The gate is opening," the creature replied, its voice calm. "It connects worlds, allowing passage between realms. You have fulfilled your role as the key." Ryan's stomach churned. "You never said anything about this. What's going to come through that gate?" The creature turned its gaze to him, its expression unreadable. "The balance must be restored. What lies beyond the gate is necessary for the survival of your world, and many others." Before Ryan could respond, a deafening explosion rocked the chamber. He turned to see the tactical team bursting through the passageway, their weapons trained on the creature and the gate. "Stand down!" the leader barked, but the creature didn't flinch. Instead, it raised one arm and the air around it rippled like a heat wave. The soldiers opened fire, but the bullets seemed to dissolve before reaching their target. The creature responded with a pulse of energy, sending the team sprawling to the ground. Ryan ducked behind the pedestal, his heart racing. The gate continued to swirl above him, its energy growing more intense. He could feel its pull, like it was drawing him in. "Ryan!" Eddie's voice cut through the chaos. Ryan turned to see his friend stumbling into the chamber, his face bloodied but determined. "Eddie!" Relief flooded through Ryan as he ran to him. "We have to stop this," Eddie said, grabbing Ryan's arm. "That thing isn't here to help us. It's using you." Ryan hesitated, his gaze shifting between Eddie and the creature. "But it said—" "It's lying," Eddie interrupted. "Whatever's on the other side of that gate, it's not here to save us. It's here to take over." The creature turned its glowing eyes on Eddie, its voice resonating with a cold finality. "You do not understand the balance. Interference will result in annihilation." Ryan's mind spun as he tried to make sense of it all. The artifact, the gate, the warnings. It was too much. But Eddie's words struck a chord. What if the creature wasn't telling the whole truth? What if opening the gate was the real threat? "We can shut it down," Eddie said, pulling Ryan toward the pedestal. "The artifact controls the gate. If we remove it, this all stops." The creature moved to block their path, its form towering over them. "Do not interfere," it warned. "The consequences will be dire." Ryan clenched his fists, his heart pounding. He had to make a choice. Trust the creature and open the gate, or listen to Eddie and shut it down. Time was running out. The chamber crackled with energy as Ryan stood frozen, torn between two impossible choices. The swirling vortex above the pedestal seemed to pulse in sync with the artifact, its pull growing stronger by the second. Eddie tugged at his arm, desperation etched on his face. "Ryan, listen to me. Whatever's on the other side of that gate is not here to save us," Eddie shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the machinery. The metallic creature stepped forward, its towering form casting a shadow over both men. "You must open the gate," it said, its voice resonating like thunder. "If you fail, your world will perish." Ryan's hands trembled as he looked between the creature and Eddie. His mind raced, replaying every moment since the UFO had appeared near the Hollywood sign. He had trusted the symbols, the artifact, and even the creature's cryptic guidance. But Eddie's words planted a seed of doubt. "Why should I believe you?" Ryan demanded, his voice cracking as he addressed the creature. "You say it's about balance, but how do I know you're not lying? How do I know this won't destroy everything?" The creature's glowing eyes dimmed slightly, as if considering its response. "The balance must be restored. Sacrifices are necessary for survival. This is the truth." Eddie's grip tightened on Ryan's arm. "Sacrifices. Ryan, that's all you need to hear. It doesn't care about us, about humanity. You've seen the warnings. You know what to do." Ryan stared at the artifact, its glow intensifying as if urging him to decide. The symbols on his arm burned hotter than ever, the pain nearly unbearable. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest, and stepped toward the pedestal. "Ryan, no!" Eddie shouted, but Ryan held up a hand, stopping him. "I need to end this," Ryan said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. He placed both hands on the artifact, the heat radiating from it searing his skin. The moment his palms made contact, a blinding light filled the chamber. Ryan's mind was flooded with visions once again, but this time they were different. He saw two futures. One where the gate opened and an otherworldly force poured into Earth, consuming it, and another where the gate was destroyed, leaving the alien realm stranded and humanity to fend for itself. "You must choose," the voice echoed in his mind, no longer the creature's but something deeper, older, and infinite. The light faded, and Ryan looked back at Eddie, who was holding his breath, his eyes pleading. He turned to the creature whose metallic form seemed to flicker as the energy in the room surged. "I choose," Ryan began, his voice firm, "to trust myself." With a sudden burst of strength, Ryan yanked the artifact from the pedestal. The swirling vortex above the gate flickered violently before collapsing in on itself. The room shuddered as the machinery groaned, gears grinding to a halt. The glowing symbols on the walls dimmed, plunging the chamber into silence. The creature let out a guttural roar, its metallic form collapsing to its knees. "You do not understand what you have done," it bellowed, its voice laced with fury and despair. "The balance is broken." Ryan backed away, clutching the artifact tightly as cracks began to spread across the chamber walls. Eddie grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the exit. "Come on, we need to get out of here," Eddie shouted. The two sprinted down the passageway as the chamber collapsed behind them, chunks of debris falling with deafening crashes. The artifact in Ryan's hands seemed to dim with each step, its once blinding glow reduced to a faint shimmer. They burst out into the open air just as the passageway caved in completely. The hillside trembled one final time before falling still. Ryan collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. Eddie dropped beside him, equally winded. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The stars above seemed impossibly bright, as if the universe itself were watching. Finally, Eddie broke the silence. "Do you think it's over?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Ryan looked at the artifact, now cold and lifeless in his hands. The symbols on his arm had faded, leaving behind faint scars. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I couldn't let it happen. I couldn't let them take everything." Eddie nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "You did the right thing, Ryan. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't worth the risk." Ryan wanted to believe him, but the creature's final words haunted him. "The balance is broken." What did that mean? Had he truly saved the world, or had he doomed it to something far worse? As they sat in silence, a faint hum reached their ears. Ryan stiffened, his heart sinking. The sound grew louder, and moments later a fleet of lights appeared in the sky. Dozens of UFOs, their metallic hulls gleaming in the moonlight. "Oh, come on," Eddie groaned, scrambling to his feet. Ryan stood, his hands tightening around the artifact. The symbols on his arm flickered faintly as if warning him. He exchanged a glance with Eddie, both of them realizing the same terrifying truth. "This isn't over," Ryan said. The UFOs hovered silently above them, their presence an unspoken declaration. Whatever Ryan had set in motion, it was far from finished.